Okay, hi everyone. I just thought I'd take you around this 911 Carrera I've got in at the moment. It's a really interesting car because it's the most basic 911 Carrera you can buy, and not only that, this car hasn't got a lot of options on it. So we usually have press cars absolutely loaded with options. We can try all those options out. That's interesting, but this is as basic as you can get them pretty much. So let's just have a quick walk around. So both the Carrera and the Carrera S have the 3-litre twin-turbo engine. This one has 385 brake horsepower, so it's a little bit of a drop, quite a big drop actually on the S, which is 450 PS, but it costs £82,000, so still a lot of money, but about £12,000 less than the Carrera S. So for that, you get your 385 PS. You do not get this number plate, by the way, this awesome number plate. You don't want to be getting up to any mischief with this though, because I think people remember that. But all this is standard, the sports exhaust, the design, the alloys here. We have got the standard 20s at the rear, and we've got the 19s at the front, so you can upgrade to 20s at the front, 21s at the rear. You can also upgrade to carbon ceramic brakes, which is about £6,000. This car has the regular brakes, and it also doesn't have the sport suspension. So you can see this lens is probably a bit fish-eyed, so it's making this gap look bigger. So it's got the smaller wheels and slightly higher suspension. So the sport suspension would lower that, but the Carrera doesn't have that as an option. That's only on the S. So there are a few toys that are actually off limits on the Carrera, including unusually the manual transmission. So it's just PDK. You have to have the regular suspension. You can't get the rear wheel steering either, which is an option on the S, or the active anti-roll control. And last time when they did this, it was the 911T that enabled all those options. So it had the Carrera engine, but you were allowed all the sort of sport suspension, the rear wheel steering, that kind of thing. So have a quick look at the front and then we'll jump inside. So the headlights as well, they're the standard headlights. They still work. I've been out in it at night, you see where you're going. So, but there are a few options on this car. It's about £1,700 worth of options. Not many in the grand scheme of things in a car like this. Let's just step inside, and then these seats. This fabric, well, leather with this fabric, which I think is called Sportex or Sportex fabric. This is a standard option, really nice and grippy and tactile. I think it looks really fabulous as well. These seats are optional. They're not a huge upgrade. I think they're £324, and they're slightly more aggressive in their shape, and here as well. And if we step inside, this seat is right down on the floor. I always like to sit low down. It's quite a racy feeling, and this is so low though. It's almost like I'm almost slightly too low, which is great, and it's a point of pride that I want it on the floor. But yeah, I'm 6'1", and I'm right down on the deck, so that's fantastic. I've taken my kids to school in this today actually, which is why the passenger seat's slightly further forward. My 9-year-old in the back, 12-year-old in the front, so they love it as well. And this is the spec sheet. You probably can't see this, so let's just see. If you end up pausing it, maybe you can see that. But base price £82,793, and the total price is £84,596 with the options. So we've said about the seats. Also, this steering wheel, GT Sport steering wheel in leather, £194, and there are a few other bits and pieces, none of which are massively expensive. One of the key ones is the reverse camera. So let's just turn this on. There we go. Look, so all this is standard. So you get the analog rev counter here, and these dials either side. So these screens, I think they're 7-inch screens. They preserve that 911 look with these. The way the dials fan out, but it's actually digital dials either side, and you can scroll through them. This is all quite cool. And then this display here, I think this 10.9 inch display is all standard, but put it into reverse and you get this camera, so that's 464 with the sensors on the back. I think it'd just take one little bump and you'd really regret not having that. So I think that's one option that I might quite like as well. If you look here, you still get the wet mode, you get a sport mode. You can still turn all the traction control all the way off, and the adaptive dampers are standard, so you can press that and firm them up there, and sport as well to increase throttle response and the aggressiveness of the gear shifts. One thing that you might notice is missing is sport chrono. So often you get the stopwatch, the analog stopwatch to signify you've got that, and with PDK you get things like a Sport Plus mode, which sharpens up the gear shifts even more. So you do notice you don't have that. They're still really quick gear shifts, but you lack that that snap of those gear shifts that you get with that mode. You also, quite interestingly, don't get the midway setting on the traction control, which I quite like. You know, you don't have to turn it all the way if you get quite a lot of slack, and for driving on the road, it's perfectly enough. But that said, I took this car out last night on some quiet roads in the dry, and it's got a lot of grip. It's not the sort of thing you're going to unsettle by putting the throttle down early in the dry. It's got a lot of traction, turns in really nicely, and actually the rotation you can get is actually from carrying speed into a corner and kind of playing with the balance with the steering and just easing off the throttle and chucking it in rather than losing traction through acceleration. But yeah, I really like this car. I think it's interesting, isn't it, that we usually get all these cars with loads of options. We haven't got the sports exhaust, for instance, here. But then I'd always like turning up like a fireworks display in the next village and letting everyone know what I'm up to. It still sounds really nice, really crisp sound. The main thing about not getting the Carrera, I think, is the lack of power. It's about 60 brake horsepower difference. So I said 385 PS, which is about 380 brake horsepower for this car, and the Carrera S is 450 PS, so about 445. So it's a big drop, and you do notice it. The S certainly feels noticeably more powerful, as you'd expect with a drop that big. And Porsche is always very clever at doing things like this in terms of staggering its product range. But this is still a great engine. It's turbocharged, twin turbocharged, very little lag. The throttle's always kind of primed and ready, and it's got a real progression to the way it winds out, so quite different to the Turbo S I had not that long ago, which is more of a traditional turbo character of a bit more lag, then a big hit, and then quickly grab another gear. This is much more progressive and more like a naturally aspirated engine, but it's still, this is a lovely thing to drive still, even with no options on it, no toys. Nice brake feel, really nice steering, really precise, not too heavy, quite mid-weighted, but extremely precise. Rides nicely, a little bit lumpy maybe at low speed, but the body's so stiff, and you know, when you turn through corners, and it's so pure and flows so nicely, and you can carry such high speed through corners in real safety that I really like this car. Now, just to check that we haven't missed anything before we sign off, we've been through all the options, all the power upgrades, and yeah, so I think really the message here is if this is your budget and you think I can only just scrape to getting a 911 Carrera and maybe a new one, or maybe you're looking a few years down the line when prices have come down, the basic car with just a very light smattering of options, or maybe even no options at all, is still a really nice thing, and I think it's really great, and I've really enjoyed driving it too.